Welcome all hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters to the only fish and wildlife conservation podcast that goes behind the scenes of the business of conservation, the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Our podcast is hosted by John Gassett from the Wildlife Management Institute and Jim Curcuruto of the Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. John and Jim will talk with experts from all sectors of the conservation arena about their passion for conserving the great outdoors. So please welcome our hosts of the Connecting with Conservation podcast, John and Jim.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Connect with Conservation, the only podcast that goes behind the scenes to look at the business of conservation in our country. I'm John Gassett with the Wildlife Management Institute and your co-host for Connect with Conservation. Here today with my fellow co-host, Jim Curcuruto from Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. How's it going, Jim?
Good. I like it. A lot of mentioning conservation. We got a guest on today that's been doing conservation work for quite some time and has got a great background. I've known him for, I think, about 15 years or so. But he is currently the Vice President and Chief Conservation Officer of Archery Trade Association. So, Dan Forster, welcome to the Connecting with Conservation podcast.
Jim, thank you for welcoming me. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
All right. So why don't you give us a little bit of background about your personal experience working in the conservation world, and then we'll talk about what's going on with ATA.
Sure, be glad to. So I've been in conservation work now for several decades. My interest in hunting obviously took me to an education in wildlife biology. I graduated from University of Georgia with a bachelor's and a master's degree in wildlife management and went to work soon thereafter with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. I was a biologist in my early careers and moved up through the agency and spent the last 12 years as director of the Wildlife Resource Division. So in my time as director, I got a lot of exposure to regional, national issues and made a lot of contacts, got connected with the industry, had some great partnerships there. And when I retired from the agency in 2016, I went to work for the Archery Trade Association, doing their policy work and their conservation agenda. And it's been a great opportunity for me to bring my biological background, my agency background, and what little political background I had to do good things for the industry.
So Dan, tell us a little bit about ATA and what it does. We focus on how conservation is funded, and there's an excise tax associated with a lot of your products that your members produce. But tell us about kind of the history of ATA and what it started as and what it's become.
So the ATA, as you can imagine, is an association of folks that are actually in the archery business. It started off principally to bring business entities together to facilitate the exchange of equipment. Back before all of the opportunities we have now with social media and the internet and the economics of trade and all the different venues, it was largely a business-to-business function. So the trade association was formed principally to provide a venue that allowed manufacturers of archery equipment to come to one place once a year. And so if you had an archery retail shop somewhere in the United States, you went to the ATA show because it was a chance for you to put your hands on equipment, to place orders for purchasing equipment. There are often deals and seminars. And so from that time, we basically kept that same concept, and it still provides one of the best business-to-business venues offered, certainly the best in our industry. And so you can come, and we've got lots of vendors there, and your retail owners and their technicians are going to be cruising the floor looking for the newest, best, brightest equipment, looking for deals, and working to make connections and stock up their shop for the coming year and learn the greatest and best of what archery has to offer. Now, as the ATA kind of matured, that venue created revenue. And the revenue then gets pumped back into the association for the benefit of our members. So over the years, there's been a lot of curriculum developed, a lot of support for state agencies and other partners to grow the industry, and also to do the work that I do, which is to engage on behalf of the industry in policy efforts so that when public lands are being discussed or regulations are being discussed, or at the state level, there's seasons being discussed that impact archery and bow hunters, then they have a voice in me and our various members to bring forward the initiatives and ideals of the association. So we're pro archery. A lot of folks think of us as a hunting organization, and obviously we are very strong in the hunting arena. The majority of the vendors at our show are related to hunting, if not directly, indirectly, but we also are very involved in target archery as well. Target archery is one of the fastest growing parts of the archery industry. It's doing very well. And so we engage with state partners and a lot of others on that front as well. Matter of fact, our show this year is going to highlight two national tournaments, one from National Field Archery Association and one from S3DA. And we're also opening up a consumer part to our show. So the first 2 days will be the traditional business to business, but after that, if you're a hunter and you want to get in the door and been wanting to get in the door for a long time, this is going to be your opportunity to shop and see and touch and feel some of the greatest and newest pieces of archery equipment and talk to some experts for yourself. So we're excited about this year's show and invite everybody to come.
Well, that is exciting because I've been to a number of these, as you know, and it's always been the business to business thing. It's kind of a closed show where retailers are making orders for manufacturers and distributors, but you can shoot pretty much any equipment that's there. There's a place to actually test it out. So as a consumer, what better place, if you're in the market, what better place to go than where you can shoot every bow available, and see which one fits the best, which one feels the best. That's a great concept, I think. Talking about, one of the issues associated, I know you mentioned, legislative issues, government affairs issues, and that sort of thing, which I know is a big part of your job. But, I know there are a number of hot topics right now, but one of the ones that Jim and I have been discussing on the podcast is, this perception or this argument by folks that are sort of on the other side of the fence from us that, well, hunters don't really pay for conservation. They pay for game species, which are targets for them. And most of the PR dollars are coming from target shooters, not hunters. But what they don't understand is, number one, that money goes and does a lot of things with habitat and other things and acquisitions that protect a lot of species. But the other is from your perspective, these are largely the same people. People are making target archery equipment, target archery equipment, are also making hunting equipment. So there's no clear segregation there. Is that an accurate statement?
Oh, yeah, I think definitely. The reality is that the money that manufacturers pay supports a lot of different things that are priorities for the states, that are important to the states. And as a former state director and trying to decide where to spend money, just think about something as simple as buying a piece of land. You might buy a piece of land because it is in a unique part of your state, has some unique features, but the reality is there's going to be deer hunting going on there for deer hunter interest, turkey hunting, maybe dove fields, bird watchers will be there, garden clubs will go visit that. There may be bathrooms, an archery range, a firearms range. There's that property that may be purchased with excise tax dollars and license dollars plays host to many, many, many interests way beyond those of simple game management. So it is certainly an incorrect statement to say that state wildlife agencies are using excise tax dollars solely to put targets out there for folks that are hunting. It's way broader than that and is in fact the lifeblood of wildlife agencies and the foundation of all the conservation efforts that we've had in the last several decades.
So when we're talking about, purchasing product, let's walk our listeners and viewers through if Joe customer or Joanne customer goes into an archery store, whether for recreational target shooting or for hunting, what type of products are taxed and at what level, and how much does that come to on an annual basis?
So for the archery industry, we're a little different than the firearms and ammunition industry. And back in the 70s, the archery industry saw, with the leadership of Fred Bear, saw all the advancements that had occurred in the introduction or reintroduction of many game species that were depleted in his younger days. And so he brought the industry along and said, this is something we need to invest in as well. It is that. It's an investment because unlike other taxes that we all pay, this one is a dedicated tax that goes for a specific purpose, and it has lots of strings, lots of guidance, and so the industry feels good that the money is being supported for good things. So at that time in the 70s, the archery industry ended up taxing bows and arrows, which are obvious, but also everything that attaches to a bow. So it includes sights, arrow rests, kisser buttons, stabilizers, the list goes on and on. So we have many manufacturers beyond just those major bow manufacturers that you can name that contribute to the excise tax. So our equipment is taxed at the 11% level. So it's a tax that's hidden from the hunters. So the hunters don't even realize which items are taxed and necessarily that they're getting charged, because it is a manufacturer's tax. So if you are the manufacturer of a stabilizer or a kisser button or a bow, when you sell that, be it to a wholesaler or a retailer, then the tax is affixed at that point, or it's determined at that point. So by the time a retailer gets an item, he just knows what he pays for it. He doesn't understand the full slate of embedded taxes, and then charges, an additional overhead to his customers. So neither the customer nor the retailers often know what's embedded in that tax. The only item that is astray from the 11% tax is actually arrow shafts. Arrow shafts are one of the few items that is taxed on a per shaft basis that is adjusted annually for a CPI. And that was a change that the archery industry brought to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the state partners said this is going to be easier for us to manage given the international trade and a whole bunch of things. So it's currently 63 cents per arrow shaft, and it's going to be adjusted up a couple pennies next year, like it has several years. So it's actually way more than 11% if you buy the cheapest dozen arrows out there at $35. But if you're buying some fairly expensive target arrows, it's going to be significantly less than 11%. But overall, they still contribute significantly to the excise tax pot. And the archery industry has contributed over $1 billion since inception and averages around $50 million a year in total. So for each state agency, that's pretty significant dollars, and something that they are very appreciative to get.
Well, I'm glad you brought up arrows, because that was on my list to talk about. And specifically, I think you know why, and that's the issue of slippage. So for our listeners who don't understand, as Dan said, manufacturers, when they manufacture the product that's a taxable product, they have to pay the tax on it. That's a requirement. Or if it's manufactured overseas, it's the first point of import into the country where the tax is paid. And arrows, I think, are one of the things that brought this idea of slippage, or people avoiding the tax, to light for us, because we found I think y'all found some were being brought in labeled as medical devices or anything but arrows because you don't have to pay taxes on the other things. So tell us a little bit about the slippage issue and sort of what it is and where we're at on that.
Yeah, so appreciate you bringing that up. This is the issue, as you already mentioned, that was brought to us by our members. They noticed that there was a hole in the tax collection that provided for an unfair playing field for U.S.-based manufacturers. And so we started digging into that and realized that there was, in fact, a problem. And the problem is simply the fact that if you purchase equipment through the internet from a non-U.S. based manufacturer, then the manufacturer overseas works with the internet facilitator to get that product to your door. Well, according to IRS rules, that internet marketplace who's facilitating that sale is not an importer. They're not responsible for collecting and remitting the taxes. The burden then shifts to the end user, the person whose doorstep that equipment falls on. So that is a very complicated process. There's not a lot of good information out there about that. It's small transactions at a time, and the IRS simply throws their hands up and says, we don't have the manpower to collect those taxes from individuals. They don't know they're supposed to pay it. The process for collecting it would cost us more than we'd return. And so it's been overlooked. And so, as you can imagine, 10 years ago, the amount of internet sales was a fraction of what it is now. And so if you are an arrow manufacturer and you're paying 63 cents a shaft on a dozen arrows, and you're selling $30, $35 dozen arrows, and your competition is not having to pay that, then you're getting your butt kicked. And so we saw a lot of that. And as we looked into other equipment items, the same applies. Somebody goes online and wants to buy a quiver, and they're like, hey, I can get this one for a fraction of the price. And it's in part because if it's made overseas, there's a pretty good assurance that excise tax is not being paid. So we had a hole in conservation funding. But more importantly, you're providing an unfair advantage to U.S. manufacturers for the advantage of a foreign entity, right? Because they're paying a conservation tax. Okay, so we went to our partners, including state agencies, partnered with the fishing industry because they have a similar issue with the equipment that they're paying taxes on. And so we started making some noise, and I'm proud to say that this past year, we had bills introduced in both the House and the Senate to fix this. We're still working feverishly to try and get those passed. I'm confident we will. When that'll happen and what the pathway remains still elusive.
So just as a follow-up, Dan, that percentage in many cases for these products is the profit margin for these companies. So when they're that competitive at disadvantage, they can't be profitable until that loophole is closed, I guess. And being human nature being what it is, if we could wave a magic wand, make it so, and change human nature, that'd be great, and it'd be a different world. But people are going to tend to buy the cheapest things they can buy on the internet. So closing this loophole's got to happen, or we're putting U.S. businesses potentially out of business. They can't be competitive. Is that right?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, and that was basically our message. Is we have two options. We either have to make it fair, or we have to make it go away. And our industry, I'm proud to say, said we want to make it fair. Okay, we're not screaming today that this has got to go away because we recognize the value that it brings, but it's unsustainable if it's not fair. And so we look forward to the day that actually happens.
Well, I'm glad the Archery Trade Association is working on things like this. One of the other things that I think you did recently, which was excellent, and I know you had a hand in this, was the PR modification, Pittman-Robertson Modification Act, where you, I guess, well, why don't you explain it better than I can, because you're so much involved in it, but.
There was a couple of issues at play there. One is the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports was struggling to get funding, and that is an important entity that includes state directors, NGO leaders, and industry all working together to try and grow participation. And most states were using their PR dollars to fund that organization for their share. And so we simply floated the idea that if we would take $5 million out of that fund and put it into this multi-state grant program that was already up and running, it was already receiving $3 million out of the PR fund. And that fund is used to support research projects that the states kind of control. And so the archery industry said, yeah, why don't you take $5 million of the excise taxes from archery equipment, put it into the fund, earmark it for R3 work, recruitment, retention, and reactivation, research and projects. And so when that passed, it not only helped to fund the Council of Advanced Hunting and Shooting Sports, but it's helped advance R3 initiative in many, many ways. So we're very proud, of that effort. It did a couple of other things too regarding range contributions, and it allowed basically all of the PR funds to be used, all of the Section 4 funds to be used for recruitment and retention work. So very proud of that work. And in keeping with that effort, keeping the PR modernization fruitful, we obviously had to make sure the industries can continue to contribute, which has led us to the modernization version 2.0, if you will, for trying to make the excise tax close that loophole we just talked about.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, probably long after we're gone, some people will look back and say this is probably one of the most foundational changes to PR that happened in its history, because, for years and years, agencies depended, people were going to hunt, they were going to fish, they were going to shoot, they were going to boat. So they just showed up and bought licenses and permits, and they did that. And now there's such a huge competition for their time. You got to go out and actively pursue customers. And we had a provision in PR that sort of kept that marketing aspect out of it. It made it ineligible. So that was a big part of it, is taking that away so we can go actively figure out, either do research on how to recruit new customers, right, or to actively recruit them. And I think it's, I think years from now, people will realize that was a major, major shift in a positive direction for this fund. We've done a lot of the restorations over 100 years. We've done a lot of, we still, habitat work will always be ongoing, land acquisition, but ignoring the fact that customer base has to be nurtured and tended to, it was a hole in it. And I'm glad y'all helped fill that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think states do a marvelous job of managing biological resources, the biological sciences, so to speak, but the political sciences can be equally important and challenging. And then, as we've learned recently, the social sciences. There's a lot of things that make hunters tick that we're just now learning about, trying to identify those and help states do the best job they can in opening the door. Another example that ATA did recently is we looked at bow hunting equipment regulations across the country and found out that there was just a tremendous variety in how states manage every metric you can think of, from minimum draw weights to arrow length to arrow weights to broadhead materials, magnified sights, lighted nocks. The list went on, and we simply bundled that up in a very strategic way, illuminated for each state where they were in this range of metrics. And a lot of states went, I appreciate you doing that, because we didn't know we were the only state that did this, or we're only one of three. And so we've been having a sequential change, a positive change in states updating their equipment regulations, because we know regulations can be a barrier to entry. Heaven forbid somebody take their bow that's legal in their state to another state only to find out they've broken several laws because, you don't allow lighted nocks. I didn't know I couldn't have a magnified sight. The list goes on and on. So we work not directly in a lot of R3 things because we don't have the authority, but we do an awful lot indirectly and in partnerships to try and work in the shadows, work in places the states want us to work where we can provide value added to their efforts as well.
And this as a former director is that, it's a win-win for agencies because you're constantly getting pushed by the legislature or by your customers to simplify things, make it easier to go hunt, make it easier to go, shoot. And so they want reg simplification. Here's an opportunity. Y'all put it on their plates. Here's what you can do to fix fix your archery regs to make it easier for people to participate. So kudos to ATA.
Yeah, and when I was a director, I had an issue and needed to call on ATA to help, and they came in spades and helped us get over a hurdle. And that's part of the draw for me to work for the organization because I particularly like helping states where we can in ways that they can't on their own. Very rewarding.
I remember one in particular was a reg from several states, and maybe they're all gone now, but it was the reg that said a bow had to be capable of casting an arrow so many yards, and it's like, how is that a measure of equipment? I mean, you could correlate it with speed and all that, but I guess it's like, that's a very archaic way of doing things. So especially with modern equipment too.
And I've learned also that, though, because I inherited a bunch of outdated regulations from Georgia too, and there's always a story as to how they develop. But most of the time, if you illuminate the eccentricities, folks will ultimately make it an issue and get them fixed. So state agency folks are not the evil enemies that sometimes are portrayed to be. They want to do the right things, but unfortunately the reg book that you're reading is a compilation of regulations they have more control over and laws of which they may have very little control over, and the blending of the two often can leave you scratching your head.
Yeah, and I know Archery Trade Association, it's we talked about recreational shooting and hunting with bow and arrow, but we can't really talk about archery without bringing up the topic of crossbows, right? Because that's always on somebody's mind. It's always a pet peeve of mine when I hear somebody say, "Oh, crossbows are people who use those aren't as proficient as people who use a recurve," or this, that, the other thing. It kind of cracks me up, the little infighting on that. But what's Archery Trade Association's stance on the old crossbow?
So we do actually have an official position on the crossbow, and we say that a crossbow is a legitimate hunting tool, and we support its use. Where we tend to not engage is that we also say we leave it up to the states to determine how to deploy it in your particular state. We recognize that there's a significant variation in hunting constituents across the country, and some are going to be more open to crossbows and certain uses, and some are not. And even to this day, we have one state where crossbows are not allowed, period, for even disabled hunters. And most states started off with disabled hunting opportunity, and in more recent times, folks are realizing that particularly in urban settings, crossbow is a pretty good tool to use to introduce people to deer hunting and get access in places they can't. So it is very legitimate archery equipment, but it is a bit controversial, and so we support our state partners for their decisions and how they're deciding when and where to implement it.
All right. Well, I'm sure there's a lot more that we can talk about, but we always want to leave our audience wanting more. So where can folks go to learn more about Archery Trade Association, all the stuff that you're doing, on the Hill, as well as, the upcoming trade shows that you have, and where do folks go for more info?
So for anybody looking for more information, it's pretty simple. Just go to archerytrade.org. Our website has a lot of information, including different contacts for areas of interest, myself and others. So hopefully you'll find what you're looking for there. But if not, utilize the contact button, and we'll be more than happy to help you in your next steps.
So Dan, thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure talking with you. I appreciate all the work you've done in conservation over your entire career, but especially your work with ATA, because we are sort of chasing this modernization, little M versus big M. You know, equipment gets better, equipment gets, you know, refined, techniques get refined. You know, all that stuff is, you know, we're constantly trying to keep up with all that. And I think y'all are doing a stellar job. You're really leading the pack at making sure things are fair for people, whether you're a manufacturer or an end user. And making sure the ultimate end game is to make sure those users stay in the field for as long as they can and participate. So thank you for all you do for that. Look forward to seeing you at your upcoming show and your first retailer event. That's going to be, you know, your consumer event. That's going to be an interesting, I may have to stick around for that and see how it goes. I always go in there. It's like, I really like to buy some of this stuff, but I'm not a business, so I can't do it. But it's like, I just have to go back to my local retailer. So I may have to make some purchases there.
Now, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, guys, and good luck to both of you.
And to our listeners, thanks for listening. If you're in the area, I think the next upcoming ATA show is in Indianapolis. So in January, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Indianapolis, if you get a chance, maybe go visit on that consumer day and see what you see there. A chance to shoot every piece of archery equipment imaginable. So you won't have the excuse. So I didn't know they made that thing, because you'll see it there. If they make it, it's at the ATA show. Make sure you express your thanks to those folks for paying that excise tax, which in many cases is a big chunk of their bottom line. And it helps fund conservation in our country. So thanks for listening. If you like this, hit the subscribe button. That helps us. It'll help you. You'll know when the next episode is going to drop. Hit the thumbs up or like button too for us. That helps us as well. Other than that, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the woods or on the water.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast. Please do us a favor and tell your buddies, friends, family, and others about what you've learned here today. If you like what you heard, come on back anytime and listen to another episode of the Connecting with Conservation podcast.